Welcome back to Hardball. Today, the Republican-led House of Representatives took the unprecedented step of voting to hold Attorney General Eric Holder in contempt of Congress. And House Democratic leaders led by the Congressional Black Caucus staged a walkout to protest the vote.
There's something evil about using the procedures of the House, especially something as severe as holding someone in contempt of Congress. To further political aims is not why the American people sent us here.
The action on the floor today is unprecedented in the history of America. Never before in history has the Congress held a cabinet officer in contempt. That's why we are here in this courtyard, to say to our Republican colleagues, shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you.
Well, White House Communications Director Dan Pfeiffer expressed the administration's disgust about the contempt vote with a statement that reads, in part, at the beginning of this year, Republicans announced one of their top priorities was to investigate the administration and to ensure that President Obama was a one-term president. Today, we saw the House of Representatives perform a transparently political stunt. But just one day earlier, a blockbuster Fortune magazine report showed that the entire Fast and Furious investigation was based on a lie. The claims about it, rather. Catherine Eban wrote the Fortune magazine article, and Sari Horowitz writes for the Washington Post and is in today's paper, had an exclusive interview with the former head of the ATF in Phoenix. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to start, first of all, with getting to the Fortune magazine issue right now. What is the issue here? I read the issue, and it seems to me it was saying that there is no substance to the charge that that they walked these guns, that they purposely allowed laws to be broken and allowed guns to fall into the hands of the cartel in Mexico so they could track those guns. Fortune magazine, tell me what the Fortune magazine piece, bottom line, says about that.
What it says is that there was no operational tactic by the ATF to choose to let guns flow into the hands of criminals. Rather, there was a protracted, intensive debate with federal prosecutors about the legal grounds for seizing these guns and arresting suspects. That's what it says.
So what is this whole fight about if there wasn't an attempt to give guns, basically allow guns to fall into the hands of killers, which led to the killing of those people? I mean, why? If your article's correct, there's no substance at the bottom of this story to justify any of this stuff, the contempt, all this demand for paper, everything, if your story's correct.
Whistleblowers inside of Phoenix Group 7, which was the ATF group tasked with conducting this investigation, had came forward after the death of a border agent and claimed that they had been forced to sit back and watch as guns flowed to criminals. What they didn't say, and what my article says, is that they, number one, had a tremendous grudge, animus against the group supervisor that they accused of orchestrating this. They didn't say that there was protracted, intensive debate with federal prosecutors as ATF agents sought permission to seize guns and were denied that permission. It didn't say any of that.
Wow. Well, let me go to Sari Horowitz at the Post. What's your reading on this basis, on the Fortune magazine piece? Is there, in fact, any hard evidence out there that the United States government, by a policy of Fast and Furious, allowed guns to fall into the hands of the bad guys, if you will, the Mexican cartel?
No, the man who I interviewed, William Newell, was the boss. He was a special agent in charge of the Phoenix office. He was the boss of the people in the Fortune magazine article. And he agreed with the premise of that article, that they didn't intentionally want guns to end up in the hands of criminals, but that they were constantly told by the U.S. attorney in Phoenix that they did not have probable cause to seize these weapons. See, they had a noble intention in this particular operation, which is they wanted to penetrate a firearms organization. They didn't want to just keep arresting the small-time straw purchasers, the street-level guys. They wanted to take down a whole organization. And to do so, they felt like they had to watch the straw purchasers. They did not have the legal grounds, they say, to go in and arrest those straw purchasers or the middlemen who they were giving the guns to.
But could they have picked these people up on gun violations if they had chosen to follow that route rather than walking the guns? If they had said, no, every time we see what looks to be a gun violation at any level, we're going to nail them because that'll stop the trafficking. Could they have done that?
The tricky thing there is if someone goes into a gun store and buys a gun legally, right, and then passes it on to someone who is not prohibited from buying a gun, it's very hard to prove in court that there's a violation. And that they kept running into this issue, and they didn't want to keep arresting straw purchasers.
Well, let me go back to Catherine and the Fortune piece. You've really, your piece basically is the laws are so weak it's nearly impossible to stop when buying guns, and the criminals, it just seems to me that this is a pretty clear case. But why do you have people coming out of the agency itself, ATF, blaming the higher authorities, saying, no, you let them buy those guns, you let them go, you let the laws be flouted, and you're responsible for the death of those people?
Well, as is often the case, when you have a situation that is highly politicized and highly public, there is a rush for the exits. And in this case, ATF and the Justice Department initially backed the ATF agents on the ground. But I should say they also never really asked them in any detailed fashion what actually happened. And then as the political pressure mounted, there was, as I said, a rush for the exits, and the blame started rolling downhill until these ATF agents have basically found themselves alone. People are not really interested, people in authority, finding out what exactly happened.
Well, it seems to me there's a couple levels. Maybe you ladies can't follow this, but I'm going to ask you to follow this and project from your reporting. Starting with you, here's the question. Here you have the NRA in this country, which is so powerful, as we know that, going after members of Congress and saying you've got to vote our way on this area or we're going to strike it, call it against you in the next election on our scorecard. And yet here they are charging the ATF with not doing enough arrests for gun violations. Isn't that extraordinary for them to take that posture here? The NRA.
Well, look, the whole thing is extraordinary. And Chris, in Washington, it's all about politics. But, there's a very important point that needs to be made here. The whole vote today came down to something that happened with a letter written on February 4th by the Justice Department to Congress, basically saying we don't have any instances where we've ever not interdicted or seized guns.
Right.
Turned out that letter was wrong, and they had to withdraw it. And what Issa, the chairman of the Oversight Committee, and the Republicans want is all the internal deliberations in the Justice Department since that letter was written to see was there a cover-up, who knew what when. And that's what the fight is over, the internal deliberations in the Justice Department.
Oh, great. They'll never get them. Anyway, thank you very much, Catherine Eben, and thank you, Sari Horowitz. Great reporting.